The tower was dark except for the screens. South Padre Island Airport in Brownsville, Texas, occupies 18 miles of flat coastal plain at the narrowest tip of the Rio Grande Valley, where the river bends south toward the Gulf of Mexico. Most nights, aviation operations wind down before 10, an occasional medical transport, a Coast Guard overflight, maintenance repositioning. The overnight watch is quiet work, the kind of shift where 23 years of experience can fill the silence. Marcus Webb had been filling that silence for 23 years. At 3:47 a.m. on Tuesday, April 9, 2024, a Cessna 208 Caravan dropped out of broken cloud cover over the Gulf of Mexico and began its approach to runway 13 at Brownsville, South Padre Island Airport. No flight plan had been filed. The aircraft had not established radio contact until it was 4 minutes out. When it finally came on frequency, the pilot spoke accented but fluent English. He identified himself as a charter operator repositioning from Monterey. He reported an instrument malfunction. He requested emergency landing clearance. Webb granted it. Standard procedure. You do not deny an aircraft in distress. But he ran the tail number, N7831K. The FAA Civil Aviation Registry database query took 11 seconds. What returned on Webb's screen was not what was descending toward his runway. N7831K was registered to a 1997 Cessna 182 Skylane, a single-engine, four-seat piston aircraft, owned by Agropecuaria Ibarra, a legitimate agricultural company in Mexicali, Baja California. The aircraft on final approach was a Cessna 208 Caravan, a turboprop cargo hauler, physically and mechanically a different class of machine entirely. And the registration had been flagged, stolen, reported missing from a private hangar at General Rodolfo Sanchez Taboada International Airport in Mexicali, 9 days prior. The original aircraft, as far as anyone knew, was still sitting in that hangar. The Cessna descending toward Brownsville was wearing a dead man's identity. Webb reached the direct line to Border Patrol operations at the Brownsville station before the aircraft's main gear touched down. 14 minutes later, 3 vehicles from the FBI McAllen field office came through the perimeter gate onto the tarmac access road with their lights off. Behind them, a Border Patrol tactical vehicle carrying a K-9 unit. The vehicles swung around the far side of the maintenance hangars and formed a containment position between the parked Cessna and the only exit taxiway. The pilot was still in the cockpit running his shutdown checklist. He had not run fast enough. The name of the operation that would grow from this arrest, Operation Airbridge, would remain classified for 6 months. By September 2024, when prosecutors unsealed the indictment, 78 defendants across 4 states had been charged. 23 modified light aircraft had been seized or traced. A cartel aviation network that had moved an estimated $1.3 billion in fentanyl through the Rio Grande Valley over 33 months was dismantled. It started because Marcus Webb ran a tail number at 3:47 in the morning. To understand how one tower operator's instinct pulled the thread on a network of that scale, you have to understand what built the network in the first place. And that means going back 4 years, to when the land routes started closing. The Gulf Cartel is the oldest continuously operating drug trafficking organization on the United States-Mexico border. Juan Garcia Abrego built it into a continental enterprise in the 1980s by doing something no Mexican organization had done before: forging a direct supply partnership with the Cali Cartel in Colombia and using the Texas coast as the primary pipeline for South American cocaine entering the United States. Garcia Abrego was arrested in 1996 and extradited, the first major drug lord ever extradited to face U.S. federal prosecution. The organization survived. It rebuilt under Ociel Cárdenas Guillén, who was himself extradited in 2007. It fractured when the Zetas mercenary wing broke away in a war that consumed the northeastern Mexican border from 2010 through 2012. It rebuilt again. What distinguishes the Gulf Cartel's 4-decade survival is not firepower. It is adaptation. When a route is compromised, find another route. When a method is exposed, build a new method. This is organizational doctrine refined through decades of enforcement pressure, and it has kept the cartel operational through the fall of 5 separate U.S.-backed Mexican security strategies, 3 major military deployments, and more than 200 federal indictments in the United States. By 2019, land-based smuggling through the South Texas corridor was facing enforcement pressure it had not previously experienced at this intensity. A series of high-profile tunnel discoveries along the Laredo and Eagle Pass border corridors had concentrated federal attention and resources on underground smuggling infrastructure. In March 2020, federal agents uncovered a 600-foot reinforced tunnel beneath the Laredo International Bridge approaches, the most sophisticated land border tunnel documented in South Texas in more than a decade. The structure included ventilation systems, LED lighting, and a rail cart system for moving cargo at volume. It had been operational for approximately 14 months before its discovery. The follow-on investigation disrupted several mid-level logistics managers and damaged a significant land crossing operation. Border barrier construction in certain high-traffic sectors during the same period added additional physical friction to surface-level crossing routes. The cartel looked up. Fernando Aguirre Salas was 52 years old in 2021, and he had spent 30 years inside the Gulf Cartel's logistics and transportation structure without ever appearing on a DEA enforcement priority list. He was not a gunman, not a street operator, not someone whose name surfaced in intelligence reports tied to violence. He was a manager, an administrator, the type of figure that federal investigators sometimes call a gray zone actor, someone whose criminality was functional rather than violent, whose value to the organization was operational expertise rather than force. Inside the cartel's Reynosa-based leadership structure, he was known as El Tornillo, the Bolt. Colleagues described him in cooperator interviews as precise, methodical, and almost pathologically patient. He never rushed. He never improvised unnecessarily. He built systems with built-in redundancies, then built redundancies for the redundancies. Aguirre Salas had no formal aviation background, but he had spent 3 decades watching the Rio Grande Valley from the ground level, and he understood something that the tunnel architects had not fully modeled. The sky below 2,000 feet was less watched than the earth. Primary surveillance radar along the southern border is calibrated for commercial aviation altitudes, the flight levels used by airliners, business jets, and military traffic. Low-altitude radar coverage in the Rio Grande Valley has documented gaps. Aircraft flying at 800 to 1,200 feet, following natural terrain contours through the South Texas brush country, can cover significant distances with minimal electronic signature. Terrain-following flight is a core offensive tactic in military aviation doctrine for exactly this reason. Aguirre Salas, through conversations with aviation professionals inside his extended network, reached the same operational conclusion without the doctrine. The sky was not watched the way the ground was watched. Beginning in approximately mid-2021, Aguirre Salas began assembling what would become the most sophisticated cartel aviation network ever documented in the Southern District of Texas. The construction happened in layers, each one designed to be invisible from the outside. The first layer was aircraft acquisition, through a network of cutout companies and individual buyers operating across multiple Mexican states and several U.S. markets. Aguirre Salas acquired general aviation workhorses, Cessna 208 Caravans, Piper PA-31 Navajos, Beechcraft King Air 200 series aircraft. These were the commercial utility vehicles of the sky, ubiquitous in the Rio Grande Valley, present at every small regional airport and agricultural strip, their appearance generating no attention from any observer at any level of law enforcement. The second layer was modification infrastructure, the concealment system that made the network operationally viable. The fabricated avionics panels required precision manufacturing capability that did not exist within the cartel's existing logistics operations. Aguirre Salas contracted the work to Erasmo Cruz Dominguez, owner of Taller Mecánico Cruz Azul, an auto body and precision machining facility in Reynosa's Western Industrial District. The shop had purchased CNC machining equipment several years earlier to support high-end custom automotive work, equipment that turned out to be adaptable to an entirely different application. Cruz Dominguez's team obtained OEM service manuals for each target aircraft type through legitimate aviation parts suppliers. They machined avionics panels to within 1/16 of an inch of factory specifications. Panels were painted to match factory finishes, detailed with mock connector ports and wiring harness routing channels, and weighted to approximate the mass of genuine avionics equipment. Visual inspection by anyone unfamiliar with a specific airframe's avionics configuration would reveal nothing unusual. Detailed inspection by someone who did not know what they were looking for might also reveal nothing. Inside the panels, the fentanyl was compressed into shaped bricks, sized to fit the panel cavities precisely. Each brick double-wrapped in metallic mylar film to suppress thermal detection signatures. Each brick foam seated in custom-cut closed-cell material. The assembled panels were then installed in the aircraft's avionics bays as standard equipment. Load complete, flight ready. The third layer was pilot recruitment. Aguirre Salas worked through a network of aviation intermediaries in Tamaulipas and Nuevo León to identify commercially trained pilots, men with instrument ratings, multi-engine certifications, legitimate flight hours, who were willing to fly nighttime loads for compensation that bore no relationship to any legitimate aviation salary. Payment records recovered during the investigation showed per-run rates ranging from $8,000 to $12,000 for a single leg of the triangle. In a region where a qualified commercial co-pilot might earn $3,000 a month, working for a legitimate carrier, that rate was transformative. Not every pilot recruited understood the full scope of what they were participating in. Some did. Some chose not to ask. The payment structure was designed to make not asking easy. The fourth layer was the registration scheme, the simplest layer in concept, and the one that interacted most directly with legitimate aviation control systems. Stolen or cloned tail numbers from Mexican aircraft registrations gave each network aircraft a documentary identity that would take time, specific knowledge, and motivated attention to unravel. Aircraft registrations in Mexico, as in the United States, are publicly accessible. By placing a legitimate registration from an existing Mexican aircraft onto a physically different airframe, the network created documentary paper that checked clean. 44 such registration anomalies would eventually be identified across the 33 months of confirmed operation. 44 separate instances of a legitimate aircraft's identity appearing on a completely different machine. Not one had generated a federal arrest in 33 months. The triangle that Aguirre Salas constructed connected three geographic nodes: the lower Rio Grande Valley around Brownsville and Matamoros, the Laredo-Nuevo Laredo crossing corridor, and the Eagle Pass Piedras Negras zone further west along the river. Aircraft flew one leg per night, returned south of the border, and cycled back. Cargo originated from cartel-controlled staging areas in Tamaulipas, remote ranches with maintained grass airstrips. Receiving points in Texas were private airstrips, agricultural runways, and in some cases small regional airports whose overnight security infrastructure was minimal at best. By early 2022, the network was operational at scale. By early 2023, federal estimates reconstructed from Flores Barrera's cooperation records would later place monthly cargo volume across all three active legs at 1,200 to 1,800 pounds of pressed fentanyl. By April 2024, federal investigators had zero confirmed knowledge that the network existed. Special Agent Diana Reyes had joined the McAllen field office directly from an FBI National Academy Advanced Training cohort 7 years earlier. She had grown up in McAllen, done her undergraduate work at the University of Texas at Brownsville, spent a semester in law school before deciding she wanted to work cases rather than argue them in a courtroom. Her record at McAllen included 2 major fentanyl conspiracy prosecutions, a money laundering investigation that netted 17 defendants across 3 states, and a human trafficking case that required 14 months of undercover coordination across 2 countries. She was the first agent to approach the Cessna on the Brownsville tarmac. She noted 3 things before she reached the aircraft door. The airframe did not look its age. N7831K was listed as a 1997 Cessna 208, with 6,400 logged hours. Aircraft skin at that age and hour count showed micro-stress patterns around control surface attachment points, oxidation at antennae bases, accumulated grime in panel seams. This fuselage did not show those signs. The paint was too uniform. The airframe presented as significantly newer than its documented history. The cargo door latch bore fresh scratches, not wear, scratches, the kind left by recent heavy use, loading within the past several hours by her estimate. The pilot made eye contact the moment she came around the nose. And he held it. That bothered her more than either of the other 2 observations. In her experience, innocent people looked away. At the vehicles, at the agents, at the ground, at anything except the direct gaze of the approaching officer. So did most guilty people, in fact. The specific category of person who met your eyes and held steady was the person who had prepared for this moment and was executing a performance. She had seen the performance before. It rarely helped. "Sir," Please step away from the aircraft and keep your hands visible. Arturo Garza Mendez, 34 years old, a national of Mexico born in Ciudad Victoria, Tamaulipas, complied without hesitation. He spoke accented but controlled English. He identified himself as a charter operator. He explained the instrument malfunction in technically plausible detail. He described the registration situation as a documentation error he had been meaning to resolve. He said precisely the right things in precisely the right sequence. He had not looked at his phone. The phone sat in the cockpit cup holder, a Samsung Galaxy S22. No biometric lock engaged. A 4-digit PIN set but not active. The screen was on. When agents cataloged Garza Mendez's personal effects during standard inventory protocol, the screen-visible content of an unlocked device was observable under emergency exception provisions without a warrant. On the screen was a WhatsApp notification preview. The message read, N7831, confirmado salida, esperamos confirmación llegada. N7837 confirmed departure, awaiting confirmation of arrival. Timestamp, 3:41 a.m., 6 minutes before touchdown. Someone had been tracking the flight in real time and was now waiting for word that never came. Reyes called the K9 unit forward. The dog, a 4-year-old Belgian Malinois named Juno, assigned to the Brownsville Border Patrol Station, made one pass along the length of the cargo bay. She sat down hard at the third panel from the aft bulkhead. The panel looked like navigation equipment. Factory finish. Clean connectors. Precisely installed. It wasn't navigation equipment. Reyes ordered full photographic and forensic documentation before any panel was disturbed. 40 minutes of methodology. Then the first panel came out. Inside, 47 individually wrapped packages of compressed white powder nested in shaped foam cavities. Field testing confirmed fentanyl. Reyes stood back and looked at the remaining 10 panels in the cargo bay. She radioed McAllen at 5:30 a.m., requesting significant additional resources at this location, estimating close to 2,000 pounds based on panel count. The final certified laboratory weight after complete extraction, 1,847 pounds, $43 million in street value at prevailing distribution rates, 9 million estimated lethal doses. The median lethal dose of fentanyl in a non-tolerant adult is approximately 2 milligrams. 1,847 pounds contains roughly 415 kilograms of material. The math does not require explanation. This was not a drug shipment in any ordinary sense. This was a delivery of a mass casualty substance, hidden inside fake aircraft instruments, on a stolen registration, landed at a regional airport in South Texas at 4 in the morning. FBI Digital Forensics Unit analysts at the San Antonio field office processed Garza Mendez's phone under a warrant secured within 2 hours of his arrest. The WhatsApp thread ran back 11 months. It was not encrypted. It was not professionally secured. It was 11 months of operational communication, stored in plain text on a device with a 4-digit PIN that the pilot had not engaged when he landed. The contact designated as R. Flores had exchanged with Garza Mendez, loading confirmations expressed in aviation cargo terminology, weather assessments for low-altitude flight corridors, phrased as casual geographic observations, GPS coordinates embedded in what appeared to be shared restaurant location pins, payment confirmations referencing cryptocurrency wallet addresses. 46 separate transaction confirmations totaling $412,000 in outbound payments from Garza Mendez's connected wallet to a business account registered to an entity called Flores Export, Florales S.A. de CV. Analysts ran the company name within 40 minutes of identifying it. Flores Export Florales was a legally registered corporation in the state of Tamaulipas. Incorporated 2019. Federal Taxpayer Registry Number. Banorte Commercial Bank Account. A professional website featuring header photographs of refrigerated trucks loaded with flowers at what appeared to be a cold storage warehouse. An Instagram account with 3,000 followers. The most recent post a video of carnations being sorted by stem length and wrapped in tissue for shipment. The company was real. The flowers were real. The trucks crossed the border regularly. 11 of 214 recorded crossings had been flagged for secondary inspection by CBP. All 11 passed clean, because the trucks were carrying flowers. Roberto Flores Barrera, age 41, was the operations director of Flores Export Florales. Before joining the company in 2020, he had spent 8 years in commercial aviation freight logistics at a Monterrey-based freight forwarding firm, handling cargo manifests, customs documentation, weight and balance calculations for air cargo loads, international routing compliance, and border crossing protocols for commercial aviation freight. He was the exact professional profile you would recruit to build an air smuggling network. The question facing federal investigators in the hours after Garza Mendez's arrest was simple in structure and extremely difficult in execution. Flores Barrera needed to be located and taken into custody before he determined that his network had been compromised. The moment a pilot failed to confirm arrival and went silent, the network's logistics coordinator would begin assessing. There was a window. It was measured in hours, not days. I spent considerable time reviewing the sealed and public portions of the case file after the September 2024 indictment became available. And one detail kept demanding attention. Flores Barrera's phone number had appeared in the working files of a separate federal investigation 18 months before the Brownsville arrest. An HSI analyst working a money laundering probe targeting a Nuevo Leon real estate development company had flagged the number in bank communication records subpoenaed from a Tamaulipas financial institution. The flag had been entered into the lead tracking system. Then the primary cooperating witness in the real estate case was murdered in Monterrey in October 2022. The case stalled. The files were archived pending reinvestigation. The flag on Flores Barrera's number went dark with them. In the interval between that archived flag and the early morning of April 9, 2024, Roberto Flores Barrera had coordinated what federal prosecutors would ultimately estimate as the better part of $1 billion in fentanyl loads through the aviation triangle. The structural gap between federal agencies tracking cartel financial flows and those targeting narcotics interdiction is documented, acknowledged, and persistent. It exists in the space between jurisdictions, between database architectures, between investigative priorities that are funded and managed separately. What makes the Airbridge case notable is the specificity of the miss. A named individual, already flagged, who remained operational for 18 months because the flag never crossed a database boundary. That is what $1 billion in fentanyl looks like when it is invisible. The McAllen field office placed its first coordination call to FBI headquarters at 6:15 a.m. on April 9th. By 8 a.m., the DEA Southwest Division and Homeland Security investigations had been brought into a joint task force designation. By noon on April 9th, an operations center was active at the HSI field office in Laredo, positioned at the geographic center of the known triangle. 2 investigation tracks ran in parallel. Track 1, locate Roberto Flores Barrera. Investigators pulled every available record connected to Flores Export Floralis within the first 12 hours. Commercial registry documents, tax filings, bank transaction histories accessible under emergency subpoena authority, CBP movement records on all registered cross-border truck crossings. The full picture that assembled confirmed the scale of the deception. The aviation network and the flower company operated in parallel, without physical contact in the drug movement chain. The trucks moved legitimate product and provided organizational cover. The aircraft moved the drugs. The money circulated through the company's accounts after delivery, mixed with legitimate flower export revenue, laundered through normal commercial transactions. The trucks were not cover for the drugs. The trucks were cover for the company. The company was cover for the communication and financial infrastructure of the aviation operation. It took investigators 36 hours to fully model the separation. Track 2, the Ghost Aircraft Network. FBI contacts at FAA Civil Aviation Security and Mexico's Dirección General de Aeronáutica Civil in Mexico City received an emergency request at 8 a.m. on April 9th. Identify all aircraft registration anomalies across a Rio Grande Valley border corridor from Matamoros to Piedras Negras over the preceding 36 months. The Mexican Aviation Authority responded within 20 hours. 44 flagged registration cases. Registration numbers reported stolen. Registration numbers appearing on aircraft frames inconsistent with the registered airframe type. And registration numbers appearing simultaneously at multiple locations in ways that defied physical possibility. Cross-referencing those 44 anomalies against known radar activity, CBP aviation encounter logs, and law enforcement incident records from 4 Texas border cities consumed most of April 9th and April 10th. By the morning of April 11th, analysts had isolated 19 anomalies with flight patterns, timing windows, and approach vectors consistent with a single coordinated operation, not one air route. 19 individual aircraft registration pairings connected to the same systematic operation. The network was significantly larger than the Brownsville arrest had initially suggested. What's most surprising about this case is not the scale of the fentanyl operation itself. It is how thoroughly calibrated the concealment was. 3 years, 44 registration frauds. An estimated 38 or more pilots cycling through the network at various stages. A maintained manufacturing infrastructure in Reynosa. Active staging areas on 3 separate stretches of the Tamaulipas side of the river. And 0 federal prosecutions. The network had not been lucky. It had been engineered. Roberto Flores Barrera was arrested at 6:47 a.m. on April 12, 2024, 72 hours and approximately 10 minutes after Arturo Garza Mendez's aircraft touched down at Brownsville. Mexican federal agents from the Fiscalía General de la República arrived at the Flores Export Florales warehouse facility on Calle Industrial Norte in Reynosa's Western Industrial District under a binational arrest coordination agreement, executed through the Department of Justice's Office of International Affairs. The coordination had taken 2.5 days, longer than investigators wanted, faster than normal diplomatic processing timelines allowed. Flores Barrera was at his desk, on the phone. When agents came through the door, he ended the call without speaking. He stood up. He placed his hands behind his head without being asked. He asked to speak with a lawyer. Within 6 hours, he agreed to cooperate with federal prosecutors. His attorney filed a cooperation proffer within 24 hours of the arrest. Flores Barrera's decision to cooperate, as described in subsequent sentencing documents, reflected both rational calculation and specific knowledge of his deteriorating position within the cartel structure. He was not a Gulf Cartel member in the organizational sense. He was a contractor, a logistics specialist brought in for a specific technical capability, who had become, over 3 years, the indispensable operational coordinator for the aviation network's entire logistics layer. Indispensable is a dangerous position inside a criminal organization. It means you know too much. When the structure comes under pressure, indispensable becomes liability before it becomes asset. Flores Barrera had been aware, according to his attorney's filings, that his position was deteriorating in the months before the Brownsville arrest. Changes in how certain payments were routed. Restrictions on specific communication channels, subtle signals that the cartel's internal trust in his operation was being reassessed, the arrest of Garza Mendez, and his certain knowledge that Garza Mendez's unsecured phone was now in FBI forensic custody, was confirmation of a decision already forming. He cooperated fully and immediately. What Flores Barrera provided to investigators over 4 weeks of intensive debriefing sessions was described in sentencing filings as the most comprehensive voluntary disclosure in an organized crime narcotics case in the Southern District of Texas in a decade. 14 active pilots, named individually, with operational histories and contact information. 3 active staging area locations, with GPS coordinates and physical descriptions of the facilities and their security arrangements. The Taller Mecánico Cruz Azul workshop in Reynosa, identified by name and operator, with a detailed description of the panel manufacturing process and the installation timeline. The financial routing architecture connecting cryptocurrency payments to Gulf Cartel-controlled accounts, maintained in a layered offshore structure. The identity and organizational position of Fernando Aguirre Salas, El Tornillo, as the network's architect and director, and a scheduled flight, April 15th, a Piper PA-31 Navajo, tail number cloned from a legitimate charter company registration out of Monterrey, scheduled to fly the Laredo leg of the triangle carrying approximately 1,400 pounds of cargo. Assigned pilot, Rogelio Espinoza Villanueva, 29, of Tamaulipas. The flight would originate at the Miguel Alemán staging area in Tamaulipas and cross into U.S. airspace over Zapata County before approaching a private strip outside Laredo. The run was still on. The network did not know it was compromised. Federal investigators had until April 15th. The planning for the April 15th interception consumed the Laredo Operations Center around the clock through April 14th. The objective was not limited to arresting 1 additional pilot and seizing 1 additional cargo load. The goal was to execute simultaneous operations against the maximum available network infrastructure, staging areas, the workshop, individual pilots, within a compressed window, before any element of the network that had not been directly touched could scatter into Mexico. 3 separate operational components were designed in parallel. The Laredo airstrip interception of the Piper Navajo, a simultaneous hit on the Rio Bravo staging area by Mexican federal partners under the FGR, and a warrant execution at Taller Mecánico Cruz Azul in Reynosa. All 3 required synchronized execution within a narrow window on the morning of April 15th. A timing error in any one element could alert the others. At 11:30 p.m. on April 14th, the operation nearly came apart. Rogelio Espinoza Villanueva went dark. His coordination contact, an intermediary handling pre-flight communications for the Laredo leg, sent 3 successive messages between 11 p.m. and 11:45 p.m. No response. Espinoza Villanueva did not appear at the Miguel Alemán staging area for his scheduled 1:00 a.m. pre-flight preparation. Inside the Laredo Operations Center, the silence registered as an immediate threat. If Espinoza Villanueva had been warned, by a cartel intelligence asset, by a compromised law enforcement contact somewhere in the binational coordination chain, by any informational leak at any level, the network could already be moving. 14 named pilots. 3 staging areas, 23 aircraft spread across 2 countries. All of it could be sanitized and dispersed before any additional warrant could be served. A counterintelligence review of the investigation's communication channels launched immediately. Every person with access to operational details was reviewed. Every channel used in the binational coordination was assessed for interception vulnerability. The review ran for 2 hours and found no confirmed compromise. Finding no confirmed compromise is not the same as finding nothing. At 1:45 a.m. on April 15th, an HSI intelligence analyst monitoring communications on the network's known contact numbers flagged an outgoing call from a prepaid device linked to Espinoza Villanueva's operational profile. Call placed at 1:32 a.m. to a landline in McAllen, Texas. Duration, 90 seconds. The McAllen number resolved to a private residence registered to a woman named Cristina Morales Espinoza. Investigators reached her by phone at 2:10 a.m. Her brother had called. His wife, 4 months postpartum, had been admitted to a hospital in Nuevo Laredo the previous evening with a postnatal complication. Rogelio had been at the hospital since approximately 9 p.m. He had borrowed a staff member's prepaid phone to make a single call to his sister. He had no cell phone of his own with him. He had not been warned. There was no leak. There was a young woman in a hospital bed and a young father sitting in a waiting room, with no awareness that federal agents on 2 sides of the international border were reviewing his communications while he watched the hallway for a doctor. The network had already arranged a substitute. By 3:15 a.m., Flores Barrera's coordination contact, still active, still unaware that Flores Barrera had been cooperating for 3 days, confirmed the replacement assignment through monitored communications. Francisco Ibarra Cruz, age 37, of Tamaulipas. 7 previous completed runs on the Laredo leg. The most reliable pilot in that corridor's rotation, the operations plan updated in real time, the interception positions held. Here's the part that doesn't make sense on the surface, and yet, once you understand how these operations work, it makes complete sense. The network's ability to substitute a pilot on short notice, without any disruption to the cargo schedule, without any verification that the substitution itself had been monitored, reflects an operational maturity that law enforcement typically associates with much larger organizations. This was not a loosely affiliated smuggling ring. This was a managed logistics operation with documented contingency protocols. Aguirre Salas had built something that could absorb disruption at the personnel level without breaking at the schedule level. That is the definition of a resilient criminal enterprise. Francisco Ibarra Cruz departed the Miguel Alemán staging area at 4:51 a.m. on April 15th. He flew the Piper Navajo northeast at approximately 900 feet above terrain, following the standard Laredo corridor approach vector that Flores Barrera had provided to investigators. East of the Laredo urban area, crossing U.S. airspace over a low surveillance stretch of Zapata County brush country. He made one radio call, identifying himself as a repositioning flight from Nuevo Laredo International Airport. He landed at the private strip outside Laredo at 5:31 a.m. The FBI was already positioned. 6 vehicles, 2 marked, 4 without. They had established a containment perimeter before the Piper's propellers stopped turning. Ibarra Cruz did not attempt a rapid exit. He sat in the cockpit. An agent with a loudspeaker gave him instructions over approximately 90 seconds. Then he opened the door. Cargo inside the Piper Navajo, 1,381 pounds of fentanyl, in fabricated avionics panels of the same construction and concealment methodology as the Brownsville load. At 5:45 a.m., Mexican federal agents hit the Rio Bravo staging area. The ranch, operating undercover as a legitimate cattle operation east of the city, contained 2 aircraft in enclosed hangars, a Beechcraft King Air 200, matching a stolen registration anomaly from the April 11th analysis, and a second Cessna 208, with no visible registration markings. Maintenance equipment, aviation fuel in underground storage, 4 individuals on the property, taken into custody. The cattle were real. The aircraft were not there for agricultural purposes. At 6:10 a.m., a second team executed the warrant at Taller Mecánico Cruz Azul in Reynosa. The workshop's main bay contained a CNC machining station in active use, 3 completed avionics panels in sealed packaging awaiting aircraft installation, 1 panel in partial assembly on the machining bench, industrial foam material of the type used in panel construction, and metallic mylar wrapping film matching the packaging recovered from both the Brownsville and Laredo cargo loads. 6 men were present in the facility. 4 were arrested on site. Erasmo Cruz Dominguez, the shop owner, was not present. He was located at a relative's address in Reynosa the following morning and taken into custody without resistance. Between April 15th and April 28th, joint U.S.-Mexico operational teams executed 31 search warrants and 27 arrest warrants directly connected to Operation Airbridge. Additional defendants were identified through Flores Barrera's continuing debriefing sessions and through digital forensic analysis of devices recovered in the initial arrests. 14 of the 15 pilots named by Flores Barrera were eventually arrested or formally identified for federal prosecution. The 15th, known operationally as Paloma, the Dove, was never found. Federal investigators believe Paloma crossed into Mexico in the hours immediately following the Brownsville arrest on April 9th. Whether through a specific warning, a pre-planned escape protocol, or the professional paranoia of a man who had operated long enough in a dangerous environment to trust his instincts over any reassurance, Paloma was gone before any warrant could be issued. His identity has not been confirmed in any public filing. He remains a fugitive. Put yourself in the position of the investigators working April 9th through April 28th for a moment. Every arrest created immediate pressure to move faster on the next target, because every arrest increased the probability that someone not yet in custody would learn what was happening. The binational coordination required continuous real-time communication between law enforcement bureaucracies operating under different legal authorities, in different languages, with different internal approval requirements for warrant execution. The Laredo Operations Center was running on 6-hour shift rotations around the clock. Field agents crossed the border multiple times per day for coordination meetings and returned to execute warrants the same afternoon. Every lead that Flores Barrera provided had to be assessed, verified against independent corroboration sources, and translated into legally actionable intelligence before it could generate a warrant. 17 days, 31 search warrants, 27 arrests, 2 countries. And through all of it, Fernando Aguirre Salas, El Tornillo, was in Reynosa, untouched. One detail that stuck with me after going through everything available in the public record is this. The fabricated avionics panels recovered at Taller Mecánico Cruz Azul were machined to within 1/16th of an inch of OEM specifications for each target aircraft type. The search warrant affidavit for the workshop contains the following sentence in its evidence description. 6 avionics panels in various stages of manufacture were recovered, each machined to the tolerances consistent with OEM specifications for Cessna 208 series avionics bay fittings. The phrase, OEM specifications, original equipment manufacturer, appearing in a federal narcotics search warrant, is jarring in a way that takes a moment to fully absorb. You are reading documentation of a precision industrial manufacturing operation whose sole product was the undetectable concealment of a substance that kills in microgram doses. Cruz Dominguez employed 4 machinists to build those panels. All 4 are in the federal system. Looking at the structure of what Aguirre Salas built, What strikes us about this case is what it reveals about the adaptive intelligence these organizations have developed across decades of enforcement pressure. The land routes were tightened. The cartel went to the sky. When surveillance technology improved for certain altitudes, they flew lower. When tail numbers could be run, they used stolen identities from cross-border jurisdictions, where discrepancy would surface slowly or not at all. Every counter-move generated a counter-response. The network we're describing was not an improvised solution to a temporary problem. It was an evolutionary response to a decade of accumulated enforcement intelligence. Here's the take that will probably generate some disagreement. The 3-year operational window for the air bridge network is not simply a law enforcement failure. It is the product of a documented surveillance gap in low-altitude airspace monitoring along the southern border corridor that federal agencies have acknowledged and requested resources to close in successive budget cycles for the better part of a decade. The technical solutions exist. Deployable radar systems capable of covering the altitude bands the cartel exploited are available and have been available. The gap was not hidden. It was known, documented, and left open by budget decisions made above the law enforcement level. The cartel did not find a hidden weakness. They found a weakness that had been written up in federal infrastructure request documents and deferred year after year. That is an accountability question that belongs with policymakers, not with the agents who ran the warrants. What do you think? Does the federal government have an obligation to close known aerial surveillance gaps along the southern border, or are the resource constraints simply too severe to close every documented vulnerability? Drop your answer in the comments. This is a question where your perspective on policy versus operational reality matters. The indictment unsealed on September 18, 2024, ran 112 pages and named 78 defendants across Texas, Arizona, California, and Tennessee. The domestic defendants, those based in the United States, included distributors in Phoenix, Arizona, who had been receiving fentanyl loads from the network's Texas delivery points and redistributing across the Southwest through established dealer networks. A logistics intermediary in Nashville, Tennessee, who had been managing product transport from Phoenix into Mid-South distribution channels. 3 money laundering operatives in California's Central Valley, who had been processing cartel proceeds through agricultural real estate transactions, a layered method that exploited California's active commercial farmland market to absorb and clean proceeds from the U.S. side distribution operations. The network was not a smuggling operation with a distribution tail. It was a vertically integrated supply and distribution chain that extended from a Reynosa machine shop to street-level distribution points in 4 American states. The September 2024 indictment identified Fernando Aguirre Salas as the network's principal architect and operational director. It described him as having directed the acquisition, modification, maintenance, and operational scheduling of no fewer than 23 aircraft over approximately 33 months. It listed specific communications intercepts, specific financial transactions, and specific cooperator testimony connecting him to the network's operational accounts and logistics decisions. He was not among the defendants in custody. He remained in Mexico. An extradition request was filed through diplomatic channels in October 2024. Mexican authorities acknowledged receipt. The timeline for extradition proceedings, if they proceed, is measured in years, not months. El Tornillo continues to live freely in Tamaulipas. Of the 23 aircraft connected to the network, 14 were seized in United States territory during Operation Airbridge and its follow-on operations. 7 were secured by Mexican federal authorities and placed in custody pending extradition and asset forfeiture proceedings. 2 were never located. Federal investigators believe they were either destroyed, concealed at remote locations south of the Rio Grande, or stripped for parts and dispersed. Arturo Garza Mendez, the pilot arrested at the Brownsville tarmac on April 9th, pleaded guilty in July 2024 to conspiracy to distribute a controlled substance with a death enhancement qualifier, applicable because federal prosecutors connected the fentanyl pipeline to specific documented overdose fatalities in the network's domestic distribution zone. His cooperation agreement reduced a potential 20-year maximum exposure to a sentencing guideline range of 12 to 15 years. Roberto Flores Barrera received the most significant sentencing consideration of any defendant in the case. The government's 5K 1.1 motion, the formal mechanism for rewarding substantial assistance, described his cooperation as material to the identification, arrest, and prosecution of more than 50 co-conspirators, the seizure of 14 aircraft, the neutralization of 3 active staging areas, and the prevention of an estimated 20 to 30 additional metric tons of fentanyl from entering the United States domestic distribution market. His sentence was under seal as of the date of this production. Francisco Ibarra Cruz, the substitute pilot who flew the Laredo run on April 15th and rejected a plea offer, was convicted at trial in November 2024 on all counts. In January 2025, he received 22 years. There is a line somewhere in the sentencing filings for this case that reads almost like fiction. It's in the context of the cooperation argument for Flores Barrera's assistance, and it notes that the intelligence he provided enabled the prevention of an estimated quantity sufficient to represent tens of millions of lethal doses of fentanyl. Not pounds, not kilograms, doses. The scale of the network was such that its interruption is measured in those terms. Erasmo Cruz Dominguez, the workshop operator, was extradited to the United States in August 2024 and pleaded guilty to conspiracy charges. He awaits formal sentencing. Of the network's 44 documented tail number registration frauds, 26 have been associated with specific defendants and specific aircraft in the federal prosecution. 18 remain unresolved, connected to either earlier operational stages before the network reached full scale, or to parallel network elements that investigators have mapped but not yet fully prosecuted. Will El Tornillo, Fernando Aguirre Salas, be extradited to face trial in Texas? Comment yes or no below. We are tracking the extradition docket and will bring you the update the moment it moves. For Marcus Webb, the aftermath of April 9, 2024 was almost entirely private. Federal agents interviewed him twice in the week following the arrest. He testified before the grand jury that reviewed the indictments in early summer. When the U.S. Attorney's Office announced the 78-defendant indictment in September, the official public statement acknowledged early identification by an alert aviation control specialist, whose observation initiated the federal response. That was the extent of his public profile in the case. He does not use social media. He did not speak with the press. He went back to work on the next shift. There is something clarifying about that. The entire architecture of Operation Airbridge, the 78 defendants, the 14 aircraft seized, the 3 staging areas neutralized, the 10 months of investigation that followed the April 9th arrest, traced its origin to a single 11-second database query run by a man who had spent 23 years on the overnight shift, watching what normal looks like, and noticed one night that something didn't fit. No algorithm generated the flag. No automated system. No artificial intelligence model. A human being at a radar screen at 3:47 in the morning, at a regional airport on the Texas coast, noticed that a tail number did not belong to the aircraft displaying it, and made a phone call. The billion-dollar network that ended that night had operated invisibly for 33 months. It had employed, by Flores Barrera's cooperation records and subsequent investigation, no fewer than 38 pilots across 3 active corridors. It had maintained an active manufacturing infrastructure, a financial processing system, a logistics coordination apparatus running from inside a flower company's offices in Reynosa, and a fleet of precision-modified aircraft with fabricated equipment panels built to 1/16th of an inch of factory specifications. It ended at 3:47 a.m. when Marcus Webb ran a tail number. 14 minutes, 1 phone call, 23 years of watching what doesn't fit. If federal investigations like this one matter to you, if you believe that documented, source-grounded coverage of cartel operations and the cases that take them down deserves your attention, subscribe to this channel. We build every video from primary source material. Every name, every number, every timestamp in this story is drawn from indictment documents, sentencing filings, and publicly accessible federal court proceedings in case number 124C/00847, Southern District of Texas, Brownsville Division. The investigation continues. Fernando Aguirre Salas remains in Mexico. Paloma has not been found. The 18 unresolved tail number anomalies remain under active investigation. The story of Operation Airbridge is not finished. We'll be here when it is.